Paddleboarding on the Colorado River.
This time, we're in the Lone Star State. Join me as we explore the best of South and Central Texas. I love how each region of Texas has a distinct energy. We will travel through Austin and a few other cities, cover top spots to visit and eat. We will mix it up paddleboarding with the locals, enjoy world-class museums, and cover insider tips to seeing a mix of nature and nightlife. We'll cover over 800 miles and span over 2 centuries of history. Along the way, we'll see the famous Alamo Church in San Antonio, from the dusty heydays of Texas infancy next to the downtown Riverwalk. Fast forward to the space race, we'll see NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, helping land Americans on the moon. We will also visit Galveston Island on the Gulf of Mexico, a hidden gem with a warm swimmable beach and 3 very unique museums. Join us as we savor Texas barbecue, hipster Tex-Mex tacos, and tour the state capitol and visit LBJ's presidential library. Texas is more than just cowboys, stereotypes, and rolling flatlands. There's a lot of diversity here, and there's something for everyone. So let me help you make the most out of your visit to the Lone Star State. And our first destination, the state capital, Austin.
Paddleboarding on the Colorado River.
And no, this is not the famous Colorado River that flows through the Grand Canyon. That's a totally different river. This one starts and ends in Texas. Thanks to my host for taking me paddleboarding. This is the best way to see the Austin skyline.
There are turtles here in Austin.
One there and one over there.
Oh yeah.
We rented our boards from the Texas Rowing Center. If you want to get a board, make sure to come early because the lines get long. Next to the Colorado River is the Barton Springs swimming pool. Water quality is okay, the lack of chlorine is refreshing, and the clean spring source makes this a great swimming hole. And did I mention, it's only a 5-minute drive from downtown? That is if you can find parking. If you're curious about hydrology, this clean water originates as rain seeping into the Edwards Aquifer, one of the nation's largest, naturally created in the limestone bedrock west of Austin. After a full afternoon on the water, it's time for some lunch. For a taste of real Texas barbecue, head across the river to Terry Black's.
The best barbecue in Texas.
The next destination on our list is the Texas State Capitol. Located walking distance from downtown,
Folks, we're inside the Texas State Capitol.
the Capitol is open to the public.
The highest state capitol in the U.S.
302 feet high and standing taller than our nation's capital, it is a bucket list item worth checking out. Speaking of history and government buildings, there is another cool destination to check out, not too far of a walk away, in downtown Austin.
We're going to be touring the LBJ Presidential Library.
The middle floors contain LBJ's personal collection, and the top floor contains a great view of the city of Austin and a life-size Oval Office set up the way LBJ would have back in his days. In our next destination, let's take a 30-minute drive to West Austin into Hill Country to visit the landmark Pennybacker Highway 360 bridge. Once you get there, park on the north side of the bridge on the southbound direction and take a 5-minute hike to the viewpoint.
Good morning, Austin. We're going to check out the 360 bridge here. There's a short hike to the overlook in front, which we'll be taking up the hill to see the limestone canyon as well as the bridge itself.
Spanning the Colorado River, this bridge is the perfect backdrop for a photo with the Austin skyline in the background. And no trip to Texas is complete without a visit to a honky-tonk bar. We're at Broken Spoke, the place where George Strait had on his latest album cover. 6th Street Austin is the center of nightlife. Divided into 2 parts, the western portion starting in downtown has seedy touristy bars. No surprise this portion is called Dirty 6. Head a mile east on the other side of Interstate 35 for trendy venues on East 6th. This is where most of the locals hang out. There are plenty of good brunch, lunch, and coffee shops along this section. South Congress is another popular area, so be sure to check that out as well. We did a lot in Austin, but there's more to see in Texas than just Austin. I highly recommend going on some out-of-town excursions. Check out this section for some great ideas. San Antonio is under 2 hours away and makes a great day trip. Houston has a completely different large city vibe and has tons of things to see. Leaving Austin is a great way to compare and contrast these cities. It's a great way to see how things fit together culturally and geographically. Next stop, San Antonio.
There it is, folks, the Alamo. We're inside the Alamo in San Antonio. The entrance fee is free. The Alamo was the site of the Battle of Alamo in 1836, where American forces were killed. After that, American forces in Texas were motivated to fight against Santa Anna's army, thereby extending America's territory south and west, all the way down to the Rio Grande River. Sitting in the shade away from the crowds, this is probably the best part of Alamo Square. Wondering what this landscape would look like with all these buildings. Just a lone church standing here. Surrounded by skyscrapers,
You can clearly see how the Alamo's 1800s architecture contradicts with the surrounding urban landscape. A literal and metaphoric comparison of how Texas has changed over the last 2 centuries.
the Alamo is really small. It's just really one room. The rest of it is a park preserved as a square. San Antonio Riverwalk. Let's check it out.
The Riverwalk is man-made, surrounded mainly by restaurants and touristy spots. If you're really into tourist traps, the boat rides are $30 a person. Whatever you can see from the boat, you can see on the Riverwalk itself. My impression of San Antonio is it's a sleepier, older city than Austin, despite having a larger population.
Seems like a very sleepy town. A lot of businesses are closed here. We pay for parking. It's not much street parking here. They're all extorting money from the public to let you park in these private parking lots near the Alamo.
San Antonio does have its unique southwest charm. Overall, San Antonio feels like a family-oriented city with large suburbs sprawl, while Austin feels a lot more compact and has more to offer for younger people. Next up, Houston. Houston is farther away from Austin than San Antonio is, a 3-hour drive and over 200 miles away. Definitely an overnight trip if you're coming from Austin or San Antonio. Houston is a top destination, being a world-class metropolis with a totally different energy than Austin. For example, this clip was not sped up. People move fast in Houston when there are no traffic jams.
Arriving in Houston, downtown.
There's no shortage of things to do and plenty of museums to see. Our first destination, the Museum of Fine Art in Uptown. An economy benefiting from the oil boom in past decades, there's no shortage of good art in Houston. The Museum of Fine Arts is one of the largest art museums in the United States. With over 6,000 years of history on display, it is one of my favorite destinations in Houston and a must visit if you're in town. Houston, we have a problem. Houston is home to NASA's Mission Control and Johnson Space Center. There's a nice museum and tram tours take you to the astronaut training facility. And behind me, the Apollo command module and escape rocket. Now let's ride the tram to our next stop.
Welcome aboard the shuttle carrier aircraft, Boeing 747-100. Classic airplane used to transport a shuttle coast to coast.
The museum offers a unique opportunity to walk inside a Boeing 747 on your own, and to visit a mock-up of the space shuttle, which includes a life-size payload and cockpit.
Going in the shuttle.
And the centerpiece of the show, the Space Shuttle mock-up. You have a chance to check out the payload bay where astronauts do their spacewalks. Standing up close, definitely seems crazy that this 747 Space Shuttle combination could take to the skies. This is definitely a very cool museum with a very cool display. I totally enjoyed it. And our next destination, the Gulf of Mexico.
Welcome to Galveston, Texas.
Galveston is home to Pleasure Pier, a boardwalk of roller coasters and amusement rides, as well as the oil and gas industry. Offshore you can see oil rigs light up the horizon, and onshore there's a nice oil rig museum. There's a walkable, cute downtown, as well as a railroad museum, which I had the pleasure of visiting, and a tall ship museum dating back to the 1800s. You even get to ride in the cab at this museum. Engines like these were built in 1953.
This, guys, is the cab of an F-Series locomotive, perfectly restored, in working order.
And pulled flagship trains from Chicago to Galveston before the jet age. Well-preserved examples like this are very hard to find. Down the road at the beach, the waters of the Gulf of Mexico is warm enough to swim in, but the brown is due to sediments from the Mississippi River. So unlike the Florida Keys, this is not the place you want to go for snorkeling. But being right on the Gulf and home to a fishing fleet, there's no shortage of seafood and good food in downtown Galveston. And before I forget, let me warn you about the sprawl in Houston. It's real and it's bad. Make sure to give yourself ample time planning destinations around the city. And my insider tip is to travel outside of rush hours if you can. Traffic gets bad and it often takes 3 times as long to travel the same distance outside of rush hours. If you're in Houston, make sure you try the great Chinese food here. Houston is home to the 4th largest Asian American community in the United States. We covered a lot in this overview video. We hope it's helpful for planning your trips. There's a lot to see in Texas. Each city has its own unique personality, so I highly encourage you to see them all to get a full picture of this region. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please hit that like button and click that subscribe button for more content like this.